1 trillion words every single month. That's how much human communication is being mediated by Google Translate right now.
It's just a staggering number to even try to wrap your head around.
It really is. So welcome to the Deep Dive. Today is May 9, 2026, and we are looking at a stack of sources that basically prove the AI era of passive tools is officially over.
Yeah, and that Translate statistic, it really sets the scale for everything we're about to talk about, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because, 20 years ago, back in 2006, Translate was just this tiny statistical machine translation experiment.
Right, it was super basic back then.
Exactly, and it took 2 whole decades of just grinding engineering to reach that 1 trillion word milestone for a single isolated function.
And that is exactly the mission for today's Deep Dive. We are not just reading through a boring changelog of new software updates.
No, definitely not.
The sources we've gathered, they point to this structural earthquake in how computing actually works.
Yeah, it's a fundamental shift.
We are watching AI evolve from something you just use into something that, well, actually does things for you.
Right.
We're moving from these isolated, single-function tools that took 20 years to perfect, to fully integrated autonomous systems that are evolving in a matter of months.
And the Translate milestone is honestly the perfect baseline for this, because it mastered the art of looking at a sentence in, say, Spanish and turning it into English. It's the ultimate transactional relationship, you know? You provide an input, it provides a direct output, and then it basically forgets you exist.
Right, it has total amnesia the second you close the tab.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the first massive shift we are seeing in the sources.
Yeah.
The death of that transactional amnesia.
Yes. This is huge.
Let's unpack what's happening with our workspaces.
Yeah.
So Google has just rolled out a new feature simply called Notebooks, and it's directly inside the Gemini app. Because up until now, if you were, say, researching something, you might use NotebookLM. You'd upload your PDFs, your audio files, your super messy notes, and you'd talk to that specific silo of information.
Yeah, you had your little walled garden of data.
Exactly. But then you'd have to go over to the main Gemini app to actually draft an email or brainstorm a project based on that data. 2 totally different tools,
Right.
2 different contexts.
And they were separated by this massive wall of friction.
Right.
The structural change here is really about establishing a persistent context window. And to understand why this actually matters, we have to look at how these models process information.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, previously, every single time you open a chat, the AI was essentially born yesterday.
Oh, totally. You have to explain everything from scratch.
Exactly. You had to spend your own cognitive energy establishing the background, the goals, the constraints of your project, all before you could get any actual work done.
I have definitely felt that exhaustion. You spend 10 minutes writing the perfect prompt just to give the AI the backstory.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
So how does this new Notebooks feature actually solve that on a technical level?
So by integrating NotebookLM's architecture into Gemini, they are utilizing vector databases in the background.
Okay.
When you add a document to a notebook, the system isn't just like saving a file in a folder. It's actively breaking that text down into mathematical representations of meaning. Vectors.
Vectors, right.
Yeah, it creates this interconnected map of concepts. And because this map now lives permanently inside your Gemini environment, the AI maintains a state of object permanence for your complex projects.
Okay, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. So before, we were constantly bouncing between apps. This is kind of like finally moving your dusty filing cabinet and your ultra-smart assistant into the exact same room.
That is a brilliant analogy. Yes.
Like, it actually holds the memory of the workspace.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the sources detail a specific use case that highlights the impact of this, which I think is super helpful.
Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
So imagine a university student who just dumps an entire semester's worth of chaotic lecture transcripts, reading materials, all of it, into a notebook.
Just a total mess of files.
Exactly. And they use that space to generate a study guide video.
Huh.
Then the very next day, they open the Gemini app on their phone while they're just, waiting for the bus. And they ask it to draft a thesis outline based on last week's sociology lecture.
And they don't have to re-upload anything or, remind the AI what the sociology lecture was even about.
Precisely. The system already has that vector map of the lecture loaded in that specific notebook's context.
Wow.
The AI just intrinsically understands the ongoing nature of the student's workload. So that whole bottleneck of copy pasting and reprompting is totally removed.
Which allows you to just stay entirely in a flow state.
Exactly. You aren't managing the tool anymore. You're just working.
If we take a step back, this completely changes the definition of what an app even is.
It really does.
Because we're so used to bouncing between a dozen different applications on our phones or laptops to get a single task done.
Right.
But if the AI suddenly has this persistent memory of all our files and conversations in one centralized hub, the need for separate apps starts to just evaporate.
You hit on the absolute core implication there. Breaking down data silos is the holy grail of digital productivity.
Oh, for sure.
We often misdiagnose our own burnout as information overload, but the real culprit is usually information fragmentation.
Wow, yes. That mental tax of just trying to find the right document.
Exactly. Remembering the context switching between a million different interfaces, persistent context just entirely eliminates that tax.
Okay, so a shared digital hippocampus for a specific project is incredibly powerful.
Right.
But our sources are pointing to something even more drastic.
They are.
What happens when you expand that persistent context from a single project to your entire digital life?
Yeah, that's where things get really wild.
And what happens when the AI decides to actually act on that context without waiting for you to ask?
Right. So this is the major transition we're seeing, from a stateless reactive model to a stateful autonomous loop.
And we got a major sneak peek into this via some massive leaks ahead of Google I/O, which, by the way, is kicking off in just 10 days on May 19th.
It's coming up so fast.
It is. And the industry expectation right now is the total unveiling of Gemini 4.
Yeah.
But the defining characteristic of this new model isn't that it writes better poetry or generates more photorealistic images.
No, not at all.
The focus is entirely on agentic AI.
Which, for anyone who has been tracking the underlying architecture of these models, this was the inevitable next phase.
Right.
When we talk about agentic AI, we are moving past that old prompt and response dynamic.
Okay, break that down.
So in a traditional generative setup, the AI evaluates your prompt. It predicts the next logical string of tokens, gives you an output, and then it just stops.
It waits for you to do something else.
Exactly. But an agentic framework is fundamentally different. It receives a high-level goal, and then it breaks that goal down into sequential subtasks.
Like a checklist.
Basically, yeah. And it evaluates its own progress on each subtask, and it continues operating in a loop until the overarching goal is finally met.
And the leaks detail a very specific project being tested by Google staffers internally right now under the codename Remy.
Yes, Remy.
The sources describe Remy as a 24/7 proactive personal agent.
Right.
It doesn't just sit in a chat window waiting for a prompt.
Yeah.
It is actively hooked into your calendar, your incoming emails, your whole workflow.
It's always on.
Always on. It anticipates needs, it notices a meeting got moved, realizes you now have a conflict, drafts the cancellation emails, and suggests new times.
Before you've even opened your laptop.
Yes. Before you even know there's a problem.
It represents a total shift from a pull model to a push model.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, you are no longer pulling solutions out of the software. The software is pushing anticipated solutions to you.
I have to pause here, though. Because while the engineering behind an autonomous loop is objectively fascinating,
Sure.
the practical reality of this feels, frankly, deeply unsettling.
I think a lot of people are going to feel that way.
Like a proactive assistant doing my taxes or scheduling my dentist, that sounds great.
Yeah, sign me up.
Right. But there is a massive difference between an AI drafting an essay based on notes I provided and an AI constantly scanning my personal inbox and making decisions about my calendar.
Absolutely.
Isn't there a fine line between helpful and invasive? That level of access feels highly invasive.
It does. And it requires a completely different paradigm of trust from the user. Think about the transition we made with GPS navigation.
Okay.
Initially, people would print out physical maps like MapQuest. They didn't trust the digital routing system, so they used it as a backup.
Oh, yeah, I remember doing that.
Right. But eventually, the system proved its proactive value by routing people around traffic jams they couldn't even see. And now, society largely delegates the entire task of navigation to the software without a second thought.
Okay, I see the parallel you're drawing there. But I honestly have to push back on the GPS comparison.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
Because if a GPS makes a mistake, I end up on a weird side street, or maybe I'm 10 minutes late.
Yeah.
The stakes are just an inconvenience.
True.
If Remy is reading my emails and managing my calendar, the stakes are professional and social.
Yeah.
Like, What if it misinterprets the tone of an email from my boss?
Yeah.
What if it surfaces a highly sensitive medical appointment to the wrong shared calendar?
Exactly.
The blast radius of a failure is infinitely larger than just a wrong turn.
That is a crucial distinction, and you are absolutely right to highlight the asymmetric risk there.
Yeah.
The GPS analogy definitely falls short when we introduce social nuance and professional reputation, and honestly, this is exactly why the human-computer interaction model has to change from operator to auditor.
Wait, an auditor, what does that mean in this context?
Well, with reactive AI, your job is to be the operator. You write the prompt, you steer the output.
You're driving the car.
Exactly. But with a proactive agent like Remy, your role shifts to auditing the agent's proposed actions.
Okay, I think I see.
The system might draft those cancellation emails and propose the new schedule, but the friction point, the human in the loop, is the final approval.
So it queues it up, but I still have to hit send.
Right. The challenge for the industry over the next year is going to be designing interfaces that allow users to easily audit an agent's logic without getting bogged down in the micro decisions.
So we are essentially becoming middle managers for our own digital workers.
That is the exact dynamic. And managing an autonomous entity is a completely different skill set than just operating a software tool.
Well, if we're delegating all this power to autonomous agents, the immediate question that comes to my mind is, who actually codes these things?
Yeah.
Like, do we just rely on a handful of massive tech companies to build the specific agents we need?
You would think so, but no.
Right, because our next source indicates that the answer is a resounding no. You are actually being invited to build them yourself.
This is the democratization of the agent architecture, and honestly, it is arguably the most impactful piece of news in the entire stack today.
It is wild. So next month, in June 2026, Google and Kaggle are launching a massive free course called AI Agents Vibe Coding.
Vibe coding, I love that term.
It's so good. And the premise here is that non-programmers, everyday people with literally zero background in computer science, can build real, functional software by using AI agents as their coding partners.
Yeah.
It completely bypasses the need to learn complex syntax. You don't have to spend hours hunting for a missing semicolon. You just use natural language.
The term vibe coding sounds super casual, but the mechanism underneath it is highly sophisticated.
Yeah, how does it actually work?
Well, traditionally, software development requires translating human intent into rigid machine logic. Compiling code, managing dependencies, setting up server architectures.
But that takes years to learn.
Right. What vibe coding does is insert an orchestration agent between you and that machine logic.
Okay.
You communicate the intent, the structure, the vibe of the application, and the orchestration agent breaks that down into discrete coding tasks. It writes the code, it tests it, and it deploys it.
Okay, let's use a metaphor to clarify this because it's a pretty wild concept for most people.
Sure.
It sounds a lot like being the head architect on a construction site.
Okay, yeah.
You aren't physically mixing the cement, you aren't laying down every single brick, and you aren't wiring the electricity.
Right.
You are standing on site, communicating the vision. You tell the highly skilled crew what kind of house you want to build, and they translate that vibe into the technical reality of load-bearing walls and plumbing.
The architect metaphor perfectly captures the shifting bottleneck in technology.
Yeah.
Because for the last 40 years, the bottleneck to digital innovation was execution. If you had a brilliant idea for an app that solved a highly specific problem in your industry, but you didn't know Python or React, your idea just died in your head.
Or you had to raise a ton of capital to hire a massive team of developers.
Exactly. The programming language itself was a wall keeping domain experts out.
That makes total sense.
But with vibe coding, that execution bottleneck is completely obliterated. The new bottleneck is simply having a useful idea.
Wow.
Think of like a logistics manager at a shipping company who understands exactly where their supply chain breaks down, but they have zero coding experience.
Right. They know the problem intimately.
Yes. Using an agentic partner, they can articulate the problem, define the data inputs, and the AI builds a custom software solution to track those specific shipments.
That is incredible.
The barrier to entry for creating complex digital tools is rapidly approaching zero.
Which is an incredibly empowering prospect for anyone listening to this right now.
Absolutely.
We are transitioning from a society of software consumers to a society of software creators.
Yeah, everyone becomes a builder.
But let's look at the collision course we've just charted here.
Okay, let's do it.
On one hand, we have 24/7 proactive agents like Remy digging into our personal emails and making autonomous decisions.
Right.
On the other hand, we have everyday people using vibe coding to spin up custom software and their own agents on the fly.
Yeah.
If literally anyone can build an autonomous agent and these agents are deeply embedded in our personal infrastructure, who is making sure the entire ecosystem doesn't just catch fire?
Well, you are outlining the exact security nightmare that regulators have been wrestling with for the last year.
Right.
Which brings us to the final major development in our sources today.
Right. We have some major policy news regarding the guardrails.
Yeah.
The Center for AI Standards and Innovation, or AIA, has officially secured agreements with Google DeepMind, Microsoft, and Elon Musk's xAI.
This is a huge deal.
The headline here is that the United States government will now evaluate these frontier AI models for security risks before they are released to the public.
Yeah.
The sources compare this directly to the FDA testing new medications before they ever hit pharmacy shelves.
This pre-release evaluation agreement represents a massive maturation point for the entire artificial intelligence industry.
Really? How so?
Up until now, the release cycle has basically been build the model, release it to the public, and then patch the vulnerabilities as millions of users discover them in real time.
Right, the classic move fast and break things approach.
Exactly. But you can't do that with agentic AI.
But I have to ask about the sheer logistics of this. How do you actually run an FDA-style trial on a neural network?
It's not easy.
Because with a traditional piece of software, I imagine regulators could just look at the code and see exactly what it does.
Yeah.
But a neural network is essentially a giant black box of billions of weighted connections.
Right.
You can't just read the code to know if it's dangerous.
That is the core technical challenge of AI regulation right there. You cannot audit a frontier model through a static code review.
So what do?
Regulators have to rely on behavioral testing. They evaluate the outputs, not the internal code. This is where continuous evaluation frameworks come into play, specifically a practice known as red teaming.
Wait, red teaming? You mean like hiring security teams or hackers to deliberately try to break the AI?
Oh.
Or trick it into doing something dangerous before it's allowed to launch?
Basically, yes. Instead of just testing if the AI provides, helpful answers to normal questions, red teams actively try to exploit the system.
Oh, wow.
They use adversarial prompts to see if they can manipulate the agent into generating malicious code, revealing private training data, or even bypassing its own safety protocols.
Okay, so they're stress testing the behavior.
Exactly. And the government's role will likely be establishing standardized, rigorous red teaming benchmarks that every single frontier model must pass before public deployment.
Okay, but there is still a massive timeline issue here that I'm seeing.
What's that?
The FDA can take years, sometimes a full decade, to trial a new medicine.
Yeah, they're notoriously slow.
And technology evolves by the week. An AI model is practically a dinosaur 6 months after it drops.
Totally.
How does a slow-moving government bureaucracy effectively test drive an industry that is sprinting at this speed?
It is a profound structural tension. You have the rapid iteration cycle of Silicon Valley directly colliding with the deliberate, inherently cautious pace of government oversight.
Right.
Because government oversight is meant to protect public safety. The reality is that pre-release evaluation will undoubtedly slow down the deployment of new frontier models.
Which the tech companies most absolutely hate.
Undoubtedly, yes, there will be friction there. But by agreeing to this framework, these companies are making a profound concession. They are acknowledging that AI is no longer just a consumer product.
Right.
We don't require pre-release government evaluation for a new video game or a social media app. We require it for aviation, for the power grid, and for pharmaceuticals.
Oh, yeah.
This agreement is a formal recognition that agentic AI is now societal infrastructure.
That frames it perfectly. It's not an app, it's infrastructure.
Exactly.
Well, let's take a breath and zoom out for a second, because we have covered a staggering amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started by looking at Google Translate's milestone, realizing that the era of spending 20 years building a single passive tool is just over.
Gone.
We looked at the Gemini and NotebookLM merger, where vector databases are giving AI a persistent memory of our workspaces. We examined the leaks around Gemini 4 and Remy, showing the leap from prompt response to autonomous, proactive loops that manage our lives.
Yeah.
We explored how vibe coding is turning everyday people into software directors. And finally, we unpacked how the government is stepping in with behavioral testing to regulate this tech as foundational infrastructure.
When you look at the entire stack synthesized like that, it really points to a future where our relationship with computers is vastly more collaborative, but also far, far more complex.
Absolutely.
We are delegating capabilities at an unprecedented rate. And that actually brings to mind a final thought, building on the concept of the Remy agent we discussed earlier.
Oh, I'd love to hear it. Let's dig into that.
So, if an autonomous agent is constantly scanning your calendar, filtering your emails, anticipating your bottlenecks, and proactively scheduling your life,
Yeah.
it is inherently making hundreds of micro decisions on your behalf every single day.
Right. Without you even knowing it.
Exactly. It decides who gets a quick reply, when you should take a meeting, how your workflow is prioritized. And the question we have to ponder is this. As AI gets exponentially better at making these choices, what happens to our own human muscle for decision-making?
Oh, wow.
Do we become liberated from the mundane, finally free to focus entirely on big-picture creativity? Or by outsourcing the friction of daily choices, do we slowly, quietly atrophy our ability to steer our own ships?
That is a fascinating and honestly deeply unsettling question to leave on.
Yeah.
Because the daily friction of making choices might actually be the very thing that keeps us engaged with our own lives.
Precisely.
As the X-ray of our daily routines gets handed over to autonomous agents, we're no longer just looking at what a tool can do for us. We're looking at what a partnership might take away from us.
It's something everyone needs to think about.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the sources today. Keep an eye on that horizon, keep questioning the systems you delegate to, and we will catch you next time.